Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Straight Science. If you have far on to Straight Science, you have the internet, which most of northern and western Alaska in the hubs seems to be without. Luckily, we were able to pull this out of a hat thanks to a Starlink connection. Straight Science is an evening science seminar series put on by UAF Northwest Campus here, and also UAF, University of Alaska Fairbanks, Alaska Sea Grant, also in Nome, also part of Northwest Campus here tonight in the office. So tonight it is stormy outside. We are all trying to glom onto what existing internet we have. And tonight we're talking about sharks. Sabrina left off last year, April 2022, she did a Straight Science introducing us to the world of the salmon shark and some of the preliminary tag data on its movements. And Sabrina is a marine biologist with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game in Anchorage. So we appreciate her calling in as well. And her primary job is studying salmon. But the job that seems to be, for us, most exciting, although we love the salmon, don't get me wrong, but is her study of the salmon shark, because this is a shark that we have in the region. We're seeing it, I think, a little bit more often, and we're seeing it move into places like the Chukchi Sea and whatnot. So maybe it's been around. I am not a shark aficionado, but Sabrina Garcia is. So save your shark questions for the end. And she is going to give us some of the latest tag data and more information about really new information from her work with the fascinating salmon shark. With that, I'll give it to you, Sabrina, and take it away. Thank you so much for coming.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Gay. Again, my name is Sabrina Garcia. I'm with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and tonight I'm going to be chatting with you all about one of my favorite things, the salmon shark, and about a collaborative salmon shark tagging program that we have here in Alaska and what it has taught us about salmon sharks, especially those that we find in the Bering Sea. So before diving into the tagging work, it helps to get to know the salmon shark a little bit better. This shark is a widely distributed predator found in the coastal and oceanic waters of the North Pacific. Hopefully you guys can see my cursor. These areas in red on this map is where we find the salmon shark. So they range from Japan up into the Bering Sea and then down the coast into California. And salmon sharks, they reach about, we think, about 25 years of age, and they're typically between 6 to 7 feet in length. Now, salmon sharks are part of the lamnid shark family, and that includes great whites, makos, and porbeagle sharks. And the very unique thing about the lamnid shark family is that they're all endothermic. And what endothermic means is that these sharks, unlike any other shark, can keep their body temperature above that of the surrounding water. And this is a very key feature to the salmon shark. Because of the lamnid sharks, so of the great whites and the mako sharks, the salmon sharks have the greatest ability to increase their body temperature. And this is why we tend to see these sharks much farther north and much deeper than the other lamnid sharks, like the white sharks and the makos. So what I've shown in this figure on the left, this was a big tagging study that was done by Stanford University. It was called the Tagging of Pelagic Predators program. And what they did was they put a bunch of satellite tags on salmon sharks, white sharks or great white sharks, and on mako sharks. And what I'm showing in this map are the daily locations of all of those sharks, with salmon sharks shown in blue, white sharks shown in black, and mako sharks shown in red. And what I want you to walk away from this figure is that you can see the great white sharks have a pretty narrow range. And then you can see that the mako sharks in red go a little bit farther north than the great whites do. But those salmon sharks are really ranging far north into Alaska, a few of them into the Bering Sea. And again, that's because of these sharks. The salmon shark does a really great job of keeping their internal body temperature above that of the surrounding water, and it allows them to venture into our really cold Alaskan waters. So as their name suggests, salmon sharks do eat salmon, but they are opportunistic. So what that means is that they're going to eat whatever is readily available. Actually, if you look through some Russian papers, the common name for salmon sharks is actually herring shark. And that's likely due to the fact that when our collaborators on the other side of the Bering Sea see salmon sharks, they're usually feeding on herring aggregations in the northwestern Bering Sea. And based on stomach content analysis, salmon sharks have a very varied diet. And it appears that they just happen to eat whatever prey are available and easy to catch. And so what I'm showing on this figure is some of the things that they've found in salmon shark stomachs. So going from the top left, we have spiny dogfish, sablefish, squid, Pacific herring, lancet fish, pollock, and of course, salmon there in the bottom left. And then some of the things that I'm not showing, but that have also been found in salmon shark stomachs are rockfish, lumpfishes, some even had tanner crab, saury, and lanternfishes. And one of the things about salmon shark diets is that they likely vary across space and across time. So in general, salmon are the primary prey in the summertime, and their diets seem to shift primarily to squid or other fish species during other parts of the year. But much about what we know about salmon shark diets is based on very limited stomach content analyses. And stomach content analyses, while they're very informative, they only provide a snapshot of what the shark is eating at one place and at one time. So just to give you an example of what I mean, here are two studies that looked at what salmon shark stomachs had inside of them. The first was from sharks that were caught in the Western North Pacific. So that's shown by the yellow box on the map. And these shark stomachs were mostly from young and subadult salmon sharks, and they were taken in the springtime. And across the stomach analyzed, squid were the dominant prey items, and they made up 96% of their stomach contents over the 2 years of the study. And then moving east, in that purple box shown in the top right, they analyzed salmon shark stomachs from Prince William Sound, Alaska, and these stomachs were all taken from large females in the summertime. And from these stomachs, they found that Pacific salmon, specifically pink, chum, and coho, dominated diets at about 3/4 of their stomach contents. They did find some other fish species, which are shown in blue, or sorry, shown in gray, and then some squid that were shown in blue in that pie chart. And some of the fish species that they identified were sablefish, rockfish, herring, capelin, spiny dogfish, and cod. And so one of the things I like to point out that even in summertime in Prince William Sound that is known to have these large Pacific salmon aggregations, about 1/4 of salmon shark stomachs were made up of other species. And it's, with these two studies, it's really difficult to figure out whether the diet differences that we're seeing, is it because of the sampling? Because the one sampling took place in spring, the other one took place in summer. Is it a location thing? One was in the Western North Pacific, the other one in coastal Alaska, or was it a size thing? Because the one study looked at subadults and the other study looked at large mature adults. And what I really want to highlight is the absence of diet information outside of these 4 months of the year. And this is probably one of my favorite slides, because when we think about salmon sharks or sharks in general, we usually think about them as the top of the food chain, and sometimes they are. But here in Alaska, we have offshore orca whales that specialize in feeding on sharks, and here they're mainly feeding on Pacific sleeper sharks and in salmon sharks. So in that top photo, hopefully you can see that there is an orca carrying a salmon shark that it had just caught in its mouth. And then the photo of those orca teeth on the bottom, it shows what happens to these offshore orca whales over time from eating sharks. So sharks have a sandpaper-like quality to their skin because they have very special scales they're almost like tiny teeth. So shark skin is like sandpaper, and over time, the shark skin ends up wearing down these orca teeth. So that photo of that orca is actually a very old individual who his teeth are worn down to the gums. And this was a very fun photo to get. I got this photo on the right last week. So what we're seeing in that photo on the right is an adult sea lion. And that fin that you see is a very clearly a salmon shark. We can see those spots that are, the unique identifier that that's a salmon shark. And this photo was taken in the Kodiak Harbor. Now, what I don't know is if the shark was alive and well and was taken down by this bull sea lion, or if it was already dead or close to dead and being scavenged by the sea lion. But this is very much a unique observation and very interesting to see. So when it comes to reproduction, salmon sharks mature at age 3 to 5 if they're males, and a little bit later if they're females at age 6 to 10. And females are believed to give birth every other year to about 4 to 5 pups. And one of the very interesting things about salmon shark reproduction is that their reproduction style is called oophagous, which means egg eating. And the reason that it's called that is because what salmon shark females will do is once they have fertilized embryos, what they'll do is they will release many unfertilized embryos. And as these salmon sharks work through their egg yolk, their yolk sac, which you can see in that top right photo, once they work through that yolk sac and get to a little bit of a larger size, what they'll end up doing is they will eat those unfertilized eggs that the female is releasing throughout her gestation until she gives birth to these 4 to 5 pups. So by the time these pups are born, they're a larger size because they've worked their way through the yolk sac and then they've been eating these very nutritious unfertilized eggs. And another thing that we don't know about salmon sharks is we don't know where males and females meet to mate. And so that's one of the things that still remains for us to discover about these shark species. And this photo is a pregnant female that was caught off of Nunivak Island. And I just wanted to show that those marks on her fin, hopefully you can see all those tiny little puncture wounds on her fin. Those are teeth marks from male salmon sharks. So shark reproduction in general is can be a little bit violent. So when we saw those marks on that female, we kind of had an idea that she may have either recently mated or is already pregnant. And so we did find out that she was pregnant. And so one of the things that I often get asked is, why should we care about salmon sharks? And first and foremost, we have very limited information on the population abundance and the population trends of salmon sharks. So salmon sharks are caught as bycatch in fisheries in the Bering Sea, and they're also a targeted sport fish in South Central and Southeastern Alaska. But if we don't know how many sharks are out there, we also don't know what the status of the population is. Are they increasing? Are they decreasing? Is it a stable population? And does that change across their range? So we may be seeing more sharks in Southeast Alaska, but we're starting to see a few more in the Bering Sea. But what does that mean for the population as a whole? We also know that salmon sharks are a top predator, not the top predator, but they're up there. And they're an important part of the ecosystem. They regulate species in the lower trophic levels and they maintain balance. And as a top predator, understanding where these predators go and how often they overlap with species of commercial and subsistence interest might help us understand their effect, if any, on these populations of interest. And finally, we need to have a baseline of where these sharks are found to be able to determine what a changing climate means for these populations down the line. So I tend to get reports from salmon sharks, and lately I've gotten some from Shishmaref and Point Hope, and these are both very northerly observations of salmon sharks. And it's really hard for me to know if these are rare drifters that happen to make their way that far north, or do these sharks regularly make their way that far north, but we just have better ways of communicating that information now. And so in the future, we're going to want to look back to now and find out what was normal for salmon sharks. So much about what we know about salmon sharks come from their interaction with fisheries and research surveys. But this information only provides us with very specific information from a certain time and a certain place. But tagging sharks is a research method that we use to learn about shark ecology. And the tag is the tool that we use to collect that data to answer our research question. So two of the tags that I'm going to talk about in this talk, the first one are called pop-off satellite archival tags. So the tag is there in the top. We call them PSATs for short. And what these tags do is they record data for a set amount of time. And depending on how long you want to collect data, depends on what scale of data you get. So if I want a year of data, I might only get 1 minute intervals of depth and temperature and light level data. But I can also use these tags to get very fine scale data over a short period of time on the order of 10 seconds, but over the course of 3 months. And what these tags do is they're programmed to pop off on a certain date. And so they pop off the shark, they float to the surface, and then that data transmits via satellite, and then we can download it right from our computer. They're usually attached to the back of either in the shark's musculature, just below their dorsal fin, or as you can see in the photo, they can be attached to the dorsal fin. The other tag that I'm going to chat about lots today is the satellite transmitting tags. And what these tags do is they send a location every time the shark is at the surface. So you can see the tag in action on a tiger shark in that photo on the left. And these tags, they can last for a few years. They're really valuable because you can get, every time that shark is at the surface, you can get a location point. And so the other side of that is that if this is a shark that doesn't come to the surface very often, this is not the tag for that shark. These tags can also collect depth and temperature data, but the more things that you add to these tags, the higher they get in price. So you have to really figure out what data you want from these tags when you're selecting the tag. And again, because these are sending locations when the sharks are at the surface, they're always attached to the dorsal fin with the antenna pointing up, so that when that shark's fin comes out of the water, the tag detects that it's dry and it'll ping the satellites with the location. So first, I wanted to describe what we know about salmon shark migration in the North Pacific. So in the Western North Pacific, salmon sharks are believed to migrate north in the spring and then return south to Japan to overwinter. And now these assumptions are based on when salmon sharks were caught in research surveys that were operated by Russian and Japanese fleets in the 60s and 80s. And salmon sharks in the Western North Pacific have not been satellite tagged or tracked. Now, on the other side, sharks in the Eastern North Pacific have a similar migration pattern, with sharks present in coastal Alaska in the summer, and then beginning southward migrations to California to spend their winter, although there are some individuals that remain in the Gulf of Alaska all year. No salmon sharks have been satellite tracked crossing the North Pacific, so we don't know if the sharks on the western side and the eastern side are mixing. And if they are mixing, we really don't know when that's happening. Now, salmon sharks in the eastern North Pacific have been extensively tagged in Prince William Sound, Alaska. These tagged sharks were unique in that they were all females. So sharks and salmon sharks, like other shark species, separate in time and in space by sex. And so that's why these tagging efforts, where they tagged hundreds of sharks, all of those sharks were females. And these female salmon sharks covered a lot of ground in the North Pacific. And so each of those dots on this map that I'm showing is a daily location from a tagged female shark. And you can see from these tag data that none of those female salmon sharks crossed the date line. And you can also see, if hopefully you can see that none of those sharks passed north from the Aleutians into the Bering Sea. So that was quite interesting. Now, I mentioned that salmon sharks are endothermic, which means they keep their body temperatures above that of the surrounding water, but that also makes them a very energetic shark species. So when we catch salmon sharks during our surveys, this is typically what they look like when we get them on the deck. These sharks are basically all muscle, so our goal is to work as quickly and as carefully as we can to get these sharks tagged and back in the water. And you'll notice in this video that this shark is being tagged with a spaghetti tag. So this is not a satellite tag. That small little yellow dart, I don't know if you can see it in the video, it has a unique number, and it also has contact information, so that if anyone were to recapture this shark, maybe sport fishing in Southeast Alaska, they could see that that shark had a tag, and they could call the researcher and report where that shark was captured. And what that does is that gives the researcher information on where the shark went since it had been originally tagged. So how do we tag sharks? So the first thing we want to do is, we get the shark on the deck, and we want to put a hose in its mouth to keep the water flowing over the gills. One of the things about the shark tagging is that we are not going out there specifically to tag sharks. All the time we are targeting another species like salmon, and we just happen to catch a shark. So these sharks are, our priority is to get these sharks on deck, get them tagged, and then get them back into the water. So we insert a hose in their mouth and keep the water flowing over their gills. And then hopefully in that second photo, you can see that there is a towel that's covering the shark's eyes. And what that does is it kind of calms them down and almost overwhelms their senses so that they stay still while we can complete the tagging process. And then we get the tags on the shark and then back into the water as quickly and as safely as we can. And so what can we learn from tagging sharks? So from satellite tag data, we can learn about migration patterns and find out if migrations change across seasons or across years. We can learn about their habitat preferences, both across the seascape and in the water column. So can we use the tag data to figure out if sharks prefer a certain temperature or a certain depth range? Do they show site fidelity? So what that means is, are they coming back to the same site year after year? And where do these sharks have the potential to overlap with fisheries or protected areas? And then finally, when we get these sharks on deck, we want to collect as much information as possible while we have that shark. So, our priority is to get the tag on the shark, but we also collect information on length, sex, and we also take a piece of their fin tissue so that we can do some genetic sampling. So for the rest of the talk, I'm going to be focusing on our salmon shark tagging program here in Alaska. And while I'm the person presenting all these data today, this program is truly a collaborative effort between Fish and Game and NOAA and UAF, and we even have collaborators in Canada and in Russia. And when this program first started in 2017, we had very few tags, and we were really focused on efforts in the northern Bering Sea because we were seeing that we were catching, one shark a year during these salmon surveys. And the map on the right shows the salmon shark captures during salmon surveys in the Bering Sea. And female sharks are shown in pink, male sharks are shown in that bluish purple, and unknown sex are shown in gray. And what I really hope pops out to you is that most of the sharks that we encounter in the Bering Sea are males. And if you remember, the previous salmon shark tagging efforts that happened in Prince William Sound only happened on female sharks. So the Bering Sea provides us this really unique opportunity to learn more about this portion of the population. And over time, as this program developed and the number of our collaborators increased, we really expanded our tagging efforts, and we started sending out tags on marine research surveys, not only in the Bering Sea, but also in the North Pacific, so long as they had a high probability of encountering sharks. And so, as Gay mentioned, I did get to present to Straight Science last year, and at that time we had tagged 5 sharks. The dots on this map shows the tagging locations of each of those sharks. And so at that time we had 4 male sharks, 3 of which were tagged in the Bering Sea, and a female tagged about 400 miles off the coast of Oregon.
And Sabrina, this is Gay. I just want to let you know that we have a couple of callers on, and so maybe you want to just sort of with your words, say in the Bering Sea where you caught and tagged those male sharks.
Sure, thanks, Gay. Yes,
Yep.
So 2 of the male sharks that we tagged in the Bering Sea were just south of St. Lawrence Island, and then one of the males was tagged just east of Nunivak Island. We also had a male tagged kind of smack in the middle of the North Pacific, I'd say about 300 miles south of Dutch Harbor. And then we had the female shark that was tagged about I believe it was 350 miles off the coast of Oregon. So those were the 5 sharks that I presented on when I was at Strait Science last year. And since then, we got to add 3 more sharks to the mix. So we had a male shark tagged in July 2022. He was tagged in the central Bering Sea basin. We also had another male tagged in 2022 on the southern Bering Sea shelf. And then we had a female, a very large female that was tagged essentially between the Yukon River and St. Lawrence Island. So as of today, we have tagged 8 salmon sharks through this collaborative effort. And so some of the questions that we hope to answer with these tag data are, where do salmon sharks go throughout the year? Do they visit the same sites year to year? Do they always come back to the Bering Sea? What factors might affect their migration? And are sharks from the Bering Sea a separate population? And so I'm going to try my best. I know there's some callers, so hopefully I can paint a picture of what these sharks are doing. But starting on the left, we have the first male salmon shark that we tagged in 2017. And he was tagged just west of Nunivak Island. So that's shown by the purple star there. And each of the dots on this map represent a daily location from that shark, and they're color coded by month. So to give our callers an idea of what the shark on the left did, we tagged him west of Nunivak Island, and he immediately started going south and traveled to the west coast of the United States. He spent his winter off the coast of California and the offshore waters there. And then starting in about June, he completely changed course and started making his way right back to the Bering Sea, where he arrived in August. And then on the right, we have a male that we tagged just this past summer. So in September 2022, this shark was tagged on the southern Bering Sea shelf during a NOAA survey. And that shark did, that shark did a very similar migration pattern to the one on the left, where he stayed in the Bering Sea and then rocketed south out of the Bering Sea across the Pacific, and then spent the winter off the coast of California and Baja California. But what's interesting to note is that in June, this shark really started making some directed swimming motions, and it, based on the map of the shark that we tagged in 2017, it appears that he is making his way back to the Bering Sea. These dots here for June that are in light blue, that are kind of in the middle of the North Pacific, those were from about 3 days ago. So we do get almost daily data at this point from these sharks, as long as they're at the surface. But I just wanted to show that these 2 sharks that were tagged, 5 years apart, in the Bering Sea, one in the north and one in the south, made these really directed movements to Southern California, Baja California, and then are making these very directed transits back to the Bering Sea in about June. And this one's going to be a little bit hard for the callers, but these 2 animations are from a male shark that we tagged in 2019. And again, each of the dots are a daily location that are color coded by month. And so these 2 maps, they're from the same shark, but the one on the left is his tracks from the first year being tagged, and the map on the right is from his second year being tagged. And from that first year, you can see that this shark, while he was tagged in the northern Bering Sea, he spent much of the year in the North Pacific Ocean, but then he started to make his way back to the Bering Sea in about June, and he arrived in the Bering Sea in July. And then in year 2, we see a pretty different migration pattern than we did in year 1. We see that the shark kind of went back down to that region in the maroon box, and then made a few trips between the southern Bering Sea and that maroon box. And what you can't see the bathymetry on this map, but that area within that box is an underwater chain of seamounts. And it's interesting to see that the shark returned to that same area in October, November, December in both of the years. So just something that we thought was quite interesting, what's happening around those seamounts that might be making that shark want to go back in the fall and early winter. And then these are one of the sharks that we tagged last winter. The shark was tagged during a multinational expedition across the Pacific and was tagged by our Russian collaborators. He was tagged just south of the Aleutian Islands, about 300 to 400 miles. I can't remember exactly, but it's shown by that yellow star there. And this shark also primarily used the pelagic waters of the North Pacific, kind of like we saw in the previous slide during the first shark's first year migration. In this map, hopefully you can see my cursor. You can see that underwater chain of seamounts that I highlighted in the previous slide. So here's Hawaii, and that connects all the way almost to the Aleutians there. And so, you know, seamounts are supposed to have these very strong currents around them that congregate fish. So, you know, one of the things that we think is that maybe these sharks are visiting areas as a, you know, a known food source in the winter time when most other species are pretty dispersed and not concentrated. But this shark, in addition to the shark that I just showed, visited the seamount area at the same time of year between November and December. And so the last track that I have for you is from our large female that we caught last summer between the Yukon River and St. Lawrence, shown by the pink star here. This big female was the first female salmon shark tagged in the Bering Sea. So that's very exciting. You might remember that I've been mentioning all those females that were tagged in Prince William Sound, Alaska. Those female sharks typically migrated between Alaska and Southern California. The tracks shown here by this female are unique, as she went far south, just north of Hawaii, and then again, kind of like her male counterparts, started making some directed movements north towards the Bering Sea. And she, as of a few days ago, she's on the southern Bering Sea shelf. It is interesting to note that one female that was tagged during those Prince William Sound efforts did actually go and spend time in a similar area. So from these tagged sharks, we have seen that, so where do these sharks go throughout the year? So we've seen from these tagged sharks that they range from the northern Bering Sea to Southern California, north of Hawaii and across the Pacific. But what we didn't see was that none of these sharks seem to spend time in the Western Bering Sea, south of Kamchatka, into south to Japan, which is, we know that sharks go there. So why didn't any of our sharks go there? Do these sharks visit the same sites year to year? And it seems like there are some sites, like the region around the seamount chain and the Bering Sea, that the sharks are reliably visiting year to year. We also saw that sharks, the sharks that were tagged in the Bering Sea did return to the Bering Sea the following summer. And we did see that one of our sharks actually made repeated visits to the Bering Sea throughout the year. What factors might be affecting salmon shark migration? We saw that there were some differences among the sexes. We saw that the female went straight south and then just came right back up to the Bering Sea, but we saw lots of variation between the male salmon sharks. So because of these, very distinct patterns, not just among the species, but even within among the sexes, but within the sexes, it's kind of a little bit trickier to answer what might be affecting or what goes into a salmon shark's decision-making of where to go. And finally, are sharks from the Bering Sea a separate population? This is very hard to say. The sharks that we've tagged in the Bering Sea, they went far and wide, and it's really difficult to say anything about population structure with, relatively few sharks tagged. However, it is pretty interesting that none of our sharks really went and spent time in the Western Bering Sea or made that, migration down to Japan. And so I told you at the start of the talk that we had tagged 8 sharks, but I've only shown you data from 5 of them. So what happened to the other 3? While the satellite tagging technology is incredible and every year it seems to get better and better, it's not perfect. So this shark that I'm showing here was tagged in 2021, and it was tagged with both that dorsal fin spot tag shown in purple, and that's the tag that sends off the locations every time the fin is at the surface. But it was also tagged with an archival tag that's shown in the yellow box. And so hopefully you can see that in the top photo. The map on the left is showing the daily locations from that shark. from that dorsal fin tag. And what you can see is that we only have data for the callers on the phone. Sorry, this shark was tagged between Nunavak Island and St. Lawrence. It traveled straight south in October and November. And then we kind of lost signal after December. From previous studies, we know that salmon sharks can stay below the surface for a few months at a time, but it was very unlikely that it was going to stay subsurface for any time over 4 months. So based on the lack of location data that, I wasn't getting any locations after December, I thought that either the tag had malfunctioned or worse, maybe something happened to the shark. But because we had that shark tagged with 2 tags, I had programmed the archival tag, again, that one in yellow, to pop off after a year. So what I'm showing on that bottom right graph is the depth data from that archival tag for the entire year that shark was tagged. And in yellow, that yellow arrow is marking December. So that in December is when I lost all location signal. So I didn't know where that shark was. But if you look at the depth, you can see that shark was swimming between 0 and 500 meters for the entire time of deployment after December. So the shark wasn't dead. Something just happened to the tag that made it stop transmitting. You can see at the end of the depth record that the depth got very deep. These tags are programmed to pop off after they reach 1900 meters. So either that shark found something really tasty that it wanted to go off of or to go after, and that tag popped off so that it could send the data that it had collected throughout the year. But what this shows is that, we had 8 sharks tagged. Of those 8, 3 of these tags either malfunctioned or something happened to the shark. So this just highlights the importance of being able to get as many tags out, because we never know, which ones are going to last and which ones, might get an antenna ripped off. So, but on the flip side of that, one of our tags has been transmitting for 4 years. And so these tags are marketed to transmit data for 3 years. So, getting that extra year and is really exciting to be able to get 4 years of migrations from a single shark. And so what do we want to do with these sharks? We want to continue to deploy these tags on vessels in the Bering Sea and in the North Pacific. We've got 4 tags this summer that we're going to put on vessels in the Northern Bering Sea, the Southern Bering Sea, and in the Western Gulf of Alaska. We distributed tags to our colleagues in Russia. What we were hoping to do is the salmon surveys in Russia, when they encounter salmon sharks, they encounter sharks of all sizes of both species. So that makes me think that they're seeing a different portion of the population than we are in the Eastern Bering Sea, where we're typically getting these large males and females. So I'd really like to see, where are these Western Bering Sea sharks going? And then finally, we want to use the tissue samples that we've been collecting from these salmon sharks to find out if the sharks that are in the Eastern and Western North Pacific, if they're actually 2 distinct populations that do not mix, or are they actually just one big population that's just spread across the North Pacific? And finally, how can you help me? I want to hear anytime somebody sees a salmon shark. My information is on this flyer, and typically what I want to know is, where did you see the shark? How big was it? And was it a male or a female? And hopefully you can see on that photo that you need to see the underside of the shark to know if it's a male or a female. By the pelvic fins, the male will have these 2 appendages called claspers, and the females won't have those. So because salmon sharks have this very distinct separation by sexes, it's really important for me to know if that shark was a male or female. And you can report sightings to the Nome Fish and Game Office. Jennifer Bell would be happy to take your information. That QR code on the screen will take you directly to our Facebook page. So if you want to keep getting updates about where these sharks are going, we post on that Facebook page pretty regularly. And you can also message any sightings to me from through Facebook messengers. And yeah, please remember to take photos. And if there's any teachers on the call, I have lots of, location data. And if you want to use this as a class project, I'd love to team up. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. And thank you so much for hanging out and listening about sharks this evening.
All right. Awesome, Sabrina. Awesome. So thank you for such a good presentation, and it's beautiful too. It's just flawless graphics and whatnot. Oh, I see. You got a movie with shark getting caught by a net. Yeah.
Yep, that's what they look like when they get caught in our salmon nets. They usually swim with the net, and then when we start bringing the net in, that's when they get sent to the back, and why they're pretty lively when we get them on deck.
Right. I'd be lively too if I got pushed down that tube and banged around like and I get out on deck. I'd be those actually in that video, those boots looked a little close to the mouth. I was like, oh geez, that thing's thrashing around. But anyway, you guys know what you're doing, so shouldn't worry. All right. Well, as the Straight Science audience knows, before we get to questions, or while you're thinking about your questions for Sabrina about sharks, this is a good time to show Sabrina some love in the chat box. It is never easy to be a public speaker, and Sabrina rocked the house tonight. So that is so exciting about what you found for us, especially those sharks that were east of St. Lawrence Island. And in between the Yukon River mouth and Nunivak and St. Lawrence Island. That's really interesting to me. So drop some love for Sabrina in the chat. And I will mention, while we're all thinking of that, UAF Northwest Campus and UAF Alaska Sea Grant, we are public servants of the entire Bering Strait region. We serve all peoples of the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Inupiaq, Yupik, and St. Lawrence Island Yupik peoples. So with that, any questions for Sabrina? I don't know if you can pause your video, Sabrina. I've been on my edge of my seat, just hoping that this Starlink connection, brand new this today, brand new as of office hours this morning. If it can take it all. We've got lots of people online, and it was flawless. So hopefully everyone else had no problems.
Okay,
So
should I stop sharing for bandwidth issues?
Yeah, that might be a good thing. Now we have callers, and callers get priority. So if there's any, just unmute, or there seems to be, on top of everything else, there seems to be some problems sometimes with our Zoom that we are using as far as calling in. My cell phone number is 907-434-1149. And if you're having trouble unmuting and getting a question, call 434-1149 and we'll get it answered. Otherwise, stay on and hear what the other questions are. So while people are, I don't see any hands raised. I don't hear anyone blurting out. So my question was, when I saw that shark and the bull stellar sea lion, what is the weight on a salmon shark? How big?
A really big salmon shark is probably, there's been one observation of one about 450 pounds, which was not ever substantiated. I'd say a really big salmon shark is 350 pounds. So probably not too tough for a bull sea lion to handle, but just interesting that this is the first observation I know of a sea lion predating on a salmon shark. And unfortunately, I wasn't there, so I don't know if, was this shark on someone's deck and they just threw it overboard in the harbor and the sea lion took advantage, or was, did the sea lion actually go after this healthy live salmon shark and take it down?
Right. And so know that for those who may be unfamiliar, a bull stellar sea lion, an adult male stellar sea lion, weighs in anywhere from 1,200 to 1,500 pounds. So it is a formidable, they're about 1,000 pounds less than a walrus, but nonetheless, they are quite large, and the males are predatory on large game like seals in particular. Bearded, spotted, ringed, and ribbon have all been, I believe, recovered from the stomachs, harbor seals as well, in Alaskan waters or Russian waters in the Bering Sea for that ribbon.
Yeah,
so
it might just be that this is a normal occurrence, but it's just the first time that someone was able to snap a photo and see it. But yeah, really
pretty interesting. But just so you know, they are predatory on some rather like bearded seal. That's pretty big animal. So salmon shark, they could do it, I think. So thank you for that. Gary, you've got your hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, Sabrina, great presentation. Really good. I enjoyed that a lot. I learned a lot. And I was curious, do you think that the population down here in Southeast, which there's a lot of salmon sharks around down there, do you think they just are isolated from the populations you're seeing in the middle of the Pacific there, the way you were looking at? Do you think, or do you think they're the same group that just there's a lack of data to show it one way or the other?
Yeah,
Or-
that's a great question, Gary. And I think if you ask anyone who's been working on salmon sharks, probably the biggest question is, are there two distinct populations in the
Yeah.
North Pacific, or do they mix? And we've just never really figured out where that happens. I kind of think that, we haven't really seen the sharks going from, Japan to the Western Northern Bering Sea, like they saw in those Japanese and Russian surveys. So I kind of have my money on there being two populations that might mix in the Bering Sea. The Bering Sea is pretty productive at certain times of the year, and then they just split
Yeah.
and go off to different areas. Southeast is kind of tricky too, because especially if you're fishing out in Southeast, I'm sure that there's certain times of the year where you tend to see lots of salmon sharks, probably in the summer and fall, but then you probably don't see too many in the winter. So it's tough, because in the summertime we tend to see lots of salmon sharks, so I tend to hear, oh, there's so many, they're always around, there's tons of them, and it's like, well, but you're seeing them at this one time, and we don't really know how many there are, where they're going after the times that they're concentrated in these coastal areas.
Yeah, I was curious about that because there's a few bays on Prince of Wales Island down here that just get filled with them. The people actually go over there just to fish for sharks. I've never done it, by the way, but there are people that do, and because I like sharks, they're kind of neat animal, and it's really interesting. That's good stuff. I was just wondering if those these coastal sharks are different because they, like when you see the killer whales and stuff, they actually isolate themselves as coastal, and then those that go out in the middle of the ocean and wander around and stuff like that. I was curious of whether sharks do a similar thing, but we don't know. There's just not enough data to tell one way or the other, I'm sure. But that's interesting work. I'll be anxious to see follow-ups in the future here with all your tagging and stuff. That's kind of neat. There was a guy. There was a guy, Ray
We're gonna
Troll.
rope her back in, Gary. We're gonna
Oh,
rope
yeah.
her back
Yeah,
in. We're
no,
not
it's
gonna
good.
let her off the hook, so to speak.
Yeah, no,
in the
that'd be
shark world.
interesting. I'll be anxious to hear that because it's good work.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm happy to talk sharks anytime.
Okay, good for you.
All right, thank you, Gary. And I see Tracy, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much. That's been super cool to see the work you got going on, Sabrina. I'm a fellow salmon shark lover. And I also work for Fish and Game. Right now I'm working on the Carlock Weir.
Oh, nice.
And one of our, yeah, it's pretty awesome. One of our pilots mentioned that he saw a salmon shark in the lagoon here. It's the west side of Kodiak Island. I don't know if they actually went through the reporting process, but I haven't seen it yet. But yeah, I was just kind of curious, a couple things, like you mentioned, the distinct populations. Like, what do you think would be separating it? Like, is that currents? I mean, like you said, like food source is still kind of up in the air, if that's like what makes them distinct populations.
Yeah, great question. I do want to say that I just came across, a colleague sent me a photo from a salmon shark that was fished from the Carlock River from 1889. So
Whoa.
That's pretty, if you're a Fish and Game, I'll send you the link because it's a pretty incredible photo to see, from so long ago. But was your question, what do I think might be making two, or what defines two distinct populations?
Yeah, I guess what you think would make them distinct populations, or like what factors would separate them?
Sure. So, I guess for populations, like they wouldn't mix. So Western sharks would only mate with Western sharks, and Eastern sharks would only mate with Eastern sharks. But what would cause that that separation is, I don't really know. And it kind of seems like the Bering Sea could potentially be, you know, if these sharks from both sides of the Pacific are potentially meeting in the Bering Sea, you know, how do they know which one's a Western shark and which one's an Eastern shark? I don't really know. You know, some of the things that, you know, when I was trying to figure out, like, why are some sharks that are tagged in the Bering Sea, why are they making this incredibly long migration to California to overwinter in California when some are overwintering in the North Pacific? And, you know, the only thing I can kind of guess is that, you know, maybe some sharks that are smaller, it might be a little bit harder for them to maintain their body temperatures in the cold waters that we have up here. So they, you know, there's enough food down in Southern California and waters are warmer, so it's not as energetically costly to keep their body temperatures elevated. But the sharks that we tagged, they, you know, they range a bit in size, but they are all based on their size. We would call them all mature sharks. So that kind of blows my theory out of the water. So I don't really know why we would have some going, you know, to one side and why some would go to the other. And we don't even know if that's true. It could just be that they're all mixing, and, you know, one year they might go to Japan, one year they might go to California. We'll have to see what that shark that we tagged last year that went to California, is it going to go to California multiple years? And that would be really interesting. And so we do have genetic samples from all of these sharks, but unfortunately my collaborator is in Russia, and it's been a little bit challenging to further our work. So hopefully in the next few years, we can look at the genetics and see, can we, you know, genetically distinguish these you know, what we presume are Western and Eastern sharks.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm really glad you guys are doing that. I did a lot of, you know, just little research papers on salmon sharks when I was going to school, and I was really frustrated by the lack of information that was available, and yeah, like the lack of genetic, you know, studies going on. So yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I'll send you that picture.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Okay, you're on mute.
Story of my life at the moment. So my question was also on that big female that you got off the Yukon. That is pretty interesting for lots of reasons, but one is you have only females in Prince William Sound. Is that right? Is that right? If I looked at the map.
So it's a little bit tricky. We don't only have females in Prince William Sound, but it's like 97% female in Prince William Sound.
I mean, heavy duty.
Heavy duty females, and then heavy duty males in the Bering Sea. And when we do catch females in the Bering Sea, they tend to be these really large females, like a 7.5 foot salmon shark. That's getting pretty up there for a salmon shark. So is it just that these big females can handle the, you know, the temperatures in the Bering Sea? You know, they did catch that pregnant one off of Nunavak, or some of the larger ones coming and beefing up in the Bering Sea before giving birth in the spring? We don't really know.
And my other question was, you know, in the northern Bering Sea, Bering Strait region, we have had flawless reports from extremely experienced people of what would be described as a great white shark, the way it killed and the way it was able to handle a very large prey. Great white sharks are cousin to the salmon shark, right? They're like first cousins. So they're pretty close. Yeah. So seeing, you know, I don't know because I'm not a shark person, but, you know, will you at any point be doing for your salmon shark work, talking with community members and tribal councils and others in the region that have maybe the history of salmon sharks here? Because I don't think that what was seen about the account that was possibly not, well, I know it wasn't a salmon shark, and it sounds like absolutely like it was a great white shark. For that, you know, that seems like a novel. That was novel to the people who saw it. And you know, you're saying you have these accounts of salmon sharks that could be pretty old. Will you be kind of coming up and being able to couch, or will someone at Fish and Game maybe look into getting more, you know, expert thoughts and history from the region here? Because I think there's quite a bit of super knowledgeable people that would might be able to fill in some gaps there.
Yeah, most of, as you know, I do try to collect reports around the state from salmon shark observations, especially,
Right.
primarily for this reason, to get this baseline of where these sharks, where they are, and, when are people encountering them, and are they males or females? And I would be interested in any shark observations from the Bering Strait region. And if folks want to talk to me, I'd be happy to chat with them. But I would say that there is really, this, I would say the salmon shark tagging project is what the department is really interested in. And then I'm really interested in collecting all this other
Right.
data about salmon sharks. And, if somebody wants to talk to me about, their historical observations, or, a white shark that they saw, I'd be all for it. I'll record it in my, little side database.
Would it be the kind of thing that subsistence division and you could work together? Because they do these really intense surveys and do get, if people are interested in contributing, I don't know. But I would say there may be quite a bit of knowledge in the region.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the quote around here is lack of data does not mean lack of knowledge.
Right.
For the Bering Strait region, we have so little, we're now, there's a rush for research to come in and fill the gap as things are changing here so rapidly, but truly a lack of data, maybe on the historical for in written Western science.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lack of knowledge of the marine environment in the Bering Strait region. That's kind of one of those things. So
yeah,
so
and
anyway,
this,
thank you, because
yeah, I mean, that's why, I love presenting the Strait Science, because I hope that folks in the region hear about this work and get excited. And they've got my contact, Jen Bells. Hopefully they can
Yep.
bug you too, Gay. And
yeah, absolutely. If someone sees something and wants it reported, I'll absolutely get it where it needs to go. We're all interested, and the commercial fishermen here that we have in Nome are seeing sharks as well. So I would recommend maybe, are you working with the Norton Sound Economic Development Corporation to get your
I sent them the flyer last year, but
Okay.
I'll send it to them again so
yeah,
that they can
resend
have
it,
it up
because
there.
who
Yeah.
knows? Summer 2023, we're off to a bit of a quite a start. It's cold and a little bit of delayed, but who knows what lies ahead? It seems like everything is,
Yeah.
you never know what a day is going to bring around here at the moment.
Yeah.
So
Gay, I see that there's a question in the chat.
okay, yep. How long are these tags expected to last, and are you able to age the sharks at capture? Both good questions.
Great questions.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Kristen.
Yeah, thank you. So the little archival tags, so those were the PSATs, the black ones that the shark was carrying kind of on its back. About a year is the maximum that I would want to deploy those tags. Anything after that, you kind of run the risk that the tag might malfunction and then you won't get any data. So I typically set those for a year, but those tags, they've very often been used for very short-term studies. Like, if a shark is caught on a long line, they'll tag it and look at post-release mortality. So they'll program those tags to collect really highly detailed data, but only for a month. But so yeah, 1 year for those tags. And then the dorsal fin tag, that one is about 3 years. That's what they market it as. But one of my sharks has been carrying it for almost 4 years. So,
Wow.
that's really exciting. But yeah, those are typically about 3 years. And we're not able to age the sharks that we capture. So aging sharks is incredibly challenging. And so we can't do it. Most of the times that you can age a shark, the shark does have to be dispatched to do it. You can sometimes count their rings on their vertebrae, but then some sharks don't play nicely and don't lay their rings annually. So it gets a little bit tricky. But what we can do is there's been enough work with salmon sharks that we have lengths where we can say, at this length, that is when the shark becomes sexually mature. And so we can, based on when we think they're sexually mature, we can estimate an age. But if they mature at between age 6 to 10, that doesn't mean that the shark can't be 15, because their growth is going to slow down as they get older. So we don't have an age estimate. What we do is typically say immature or mature, and that's about as good as we can get, unfortunately.
All right. Another question in the chat is, what is the power source that keeps those tags going? Christy gave you the thumbs up. That was a good answer for her.
Thanks, Christy. The power source for these tags, they have little batteries. So what'll end up happening is, so that shark that's carrying around that tag, it's going on 3 years and 9 months now. What I'll do is, when the tag sends a location data, it sends some diagnostic information. And based on the voltage, I can tell how the battery's doing. And so right now I can see that, man, that tag's still doing really well. But at some point I'm going to be able to get location data that show that that battery is draining and will eventually go silent. So it's just as long as those batteries last that is powering those tags.
And you said that you have a pop-up tag on some of these sharks?
Yeah, some of them were double tagged. Some of them, when we first started the project, I only had the archival tags. So they would only get an archival tag. Now we're moving towards just doing the location tag only.
Okay, so if people find a strange implement on the beach and you're unsure what to do, give a call to myself, give a call to Jen Bell, Fish and Game, anyone in the Nome area that works with marine resources, and we will get an answer. Sometimes it's not from a shark, but it could be. You'd be surprised how much, especially nowadays, and probably even more so as research continues to increase for good reason, where pieces of equipment like drifters and everything else is washing ashore. So please, if you find something, take a picture, and many pictures, different sides of it. Who knows, there may be a serial number or something that looks, that would be an identifier for the person who's looking for it. So, and let someone know. So with that, any other questions? Callers have been wonderful to stay on. So if you're out of town, your internet is much better than the regional hub of Nome. And we are glad that the internet here stayed put. So this is our first time trying it out, the new system. It's supposed to be a backup system, and it is. So that's great. So with no other questions, we'll bring it around to a close. And next week, actually not next week, I'm gonna be traveling quite a bit in the region this summer. Hopefully with well, anyway, traveling around. And next week on, not next week, on the 29th of June, we're going to have Wally Johnson he's got dual affiliations with Minnesota State University and Montana State University, and he has over 4 decades of migration work done on golden plovers. That's a small seabird that is in the Bering Strait region, that they travel from Nome and the Bering Strait region to Hawaii and back on an annual basis. And so he's going to give us some of the most recent tagging data that is really specific to us in this region, and includes some new data from birds that were from the Nome area. So stay tuned for that. That will be the night Thursday, the 29th of June. We won't have Straight Science next week, but we will on the 29th of June. And with that, we'll see you all next time.